Today, I'm going to tell you the story of Emma Rodriguez, who lived through one of the darkest seasons of her life until God spoke words that changed everything, words that revealed how her constant worry was actually blocking his ability to work in her situation. Before we dive into Emma's story, I want to ask you something. If this resonates with you, please subscribe to this channel and share it with someone who needs to hear this message today. And in the comments below, tell me about a time when worry consumed you, or share what you're struggling with right now. Your story matters, and this community is here to support you. Emma was 28 years old when her world started crumbling. She'd always been what people called a worrier, the kind of person who planned for every possible disaster, who carried the weight of everyone else's problems, who lay awake at night running through scenarios that might never happen. Her friends used to joke about it. "Emma's already worried about problems that won't exist for another 10 years, they'd say, laughing. And Emma would laugh too, but inside, the worry was eating her alive. She worked as a nurse at a busy hospital in Houston, and while she was excellent at her job, the stress was overwhelming. Every shift brought new emergencies, new life or death situations, new reasons to worry. What if she made a mistake? What if she missed something crucial? What if a patient died because she wasn't careful enough? The worry followed her home. She'd replay her entire shift in her mind, analyzing every decision, every word she'd said, every medication she'd administered. Had she checked that dosage twice? Had she documented everything correctly? What if she'd missed something? Her apartment was small but tidy. Worry had made her obsessively organized. Everything had its place because chaos felt dangerous. Control felt safe. But the truth was, she wasn't in control of anything, and deep down she knew it. Emma had grown up in church. Her parents were faithful believers who taught her to pray, to read her Bible, to trust in God. But somewhere along the way, trust had turned into worry dressed in religious language. She prayed constantly, but her prayers sounded more like anxious reports to God about everything that could go wrong. "God, please don't let me make a mistake at work. Please keep my mum healthy. Please help my brother find a job. Please don't let that weird noise in my car be something expensive. Please, please, please." It was exhausting. One Thursday evening, Emma got a call from her younger brother, David. He was 25 and had been struggling to find his way for years, jumping from job to job, relationship to relationship, never quite settling into anything stable. "Emma, I need to talk to you," he said, and she could hear the tension in his voice. "What's wrong?" "I lost my job. Again. And I'm behind on rent. I don't know what to do." Emma's stomach dropped. She'd been helping David financially for the past 2 years, sending him money when he was short, co-signing his apartment lease, bailing him out of one crisis after another, and now here was another one. "How much do you need?" she asked, her mind already calculating her own bills, her own tight budget. "Maybe 2,000. I know it's a lot, but I promise I'll pay you back this time." She'd heard that promise before, many times, but he was her brother, and she couldn't just let him end up on the street. "Okay, I'll figure it out." After they hung up, Emma sat on her couch, staring at her bank account on her phone. She could give him the money, but it would drain her savings. What if she had an emergency? What if her car broke down? What if she lost her job? The worry spiral started immediately. Every worst-case scenario played out in her mind like a horror movie she couldn't stop watching. She tried to pray, but even her prayers felt contaminated by anxiety. "God, what do I do? I can't let my brother be homeless, but I can't afford this. What if I run out of money? What if something happens to me? Why does everything always fall on me?" No peace came, just more worry. The next day at work, Emma was distracted. She kept making small mistakes, nothing dangerous, but enough that her supervisor noticed. "Emma, are you okay? You seem off today." "I'm fine, just tired." But she wasn't fine. She was drowning in worry about her brother, about money, about work, about everything. That night she transferred the money to David's account, and then lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. What had she just done? What if she needed that money? What if this was a mistake? What if David never paid her back? What if? Over the next few weeks, the worry intensified. Emma stopped sleeping well. She lost her appetite. She snapped at co-workers and avoided her friends because she didn't have the energy to pretend everything was fine. Her mom called one Sunday afternoon. "Mija, you sound stressed. What's going on?" Emma wanted to tell her everything about David, about the money, about the constant anxiety that felt like it was suffocating her. But she knew her mom would just worry too, and Emma couldn't bear adding to anyone else's burden. "I'm okay, Mom, just busy at work." "You always say that, but I'm your mother. I can hear it in your voice. You're carrying too much." After they hung up, Emma felt tears building. Her mom was right. She was carrying too much. But she didn't know how to put it down. That evening, Emma drove to her church. It was empty and quiet. The weekly service had ended hours ago. She sat in the back pew, surrounded by silence, and for the first time in weeks, she let herself feel everything she'd been pushing down. The fear, the exhaustion, the anger at her brother for putting her in this position again. The resentment at feeling like everyone's problems always became her problems. The guilt for feeling resentful. The worry that never, ever stopped. She put her face in her hands and cried, not quiet, polite tears, but loud, gasping sobs that echoed in the empty sanctuary. "God, I can't do this anymore," she whispered through her tears. "I'm so tired. I'm so scared. I worry about everything all the time and I don't know how to stop. I try to trust you, but my mind just keeps spinning. What if everything falls apart? What if I can't handle it? What if—" And then, in the quietest, most gentle way, she heard something that stopped her spiral completely. Not with her ears, but with something deeper. A voice so clear, so loving, so firm, that it cut through every anxious thought in her mind. "Your worries keep me from acting. Trust in me." Emma froze. The words echoed in her spirit and she felt them land with a weight that was both terrifying and liberating. "Your worries keep me from acting." She'd never thought about it that way. She'd always seen her worry as care, as responsibility, as being prepared. But what if it was actually the opposite? What if her constant anxiety was actually blocking God's ability to work in her life? "Trust in me, not try harder, not figure it out yourself. Just trust." Emma sat in that pew for a long time, letting the words sink in. She didn't understand everything they meant, didn't know exactly how to apply them, but she knew with absolute certainty that God had just spoken to her. When she finally stood to leave, something had shifted inside her. The worry was still there. She could feel it like a familiar weight, but now there was something else too, a seed of possibility. A tiny crack of light in what had felt like complete darkness. As she drove home, she thought about what God had said. "Your worries keep me from acting." It was a strange concept. How could her worry prevent an all-powerful God from doing anything? But the more she sat with it, the more she began to understand. It wasn't that God couldn't act because she worried. It was that her worry created a barrier of control, of self-reliance, of refusing to let go and let God actually be God in her situation. When she got home, Emma opened her Bible for the first time in weeks. It fell open to Matthew chapter 6, and her eyes landed on verses 25 through 27. She read the last line 3 times. "Can any one of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life?" The answer was obvious. No. Worry didn't add anything. It didn't solve problems. It didn't prevent disasters. It didn't make her more prepared or more responsible. It just stole her peace and apparently blocked God from working. Emma closed her Bible and sat in the silence of her apartment. She didn't have all the answers yet. She didn't know how to stop worrying or how to trust more fully, but she knew this was a turning point. God had spoken, and now she had to decide what to do with His words. That night, for the first time in weeks, Emma prayed differently, not anxiously listing all her fears and asking God to prevent every possible catastrophe, but simply, quietly saying, "God, I'm choosing to trust you. I don't know how to do this yet, but I'm choosing to trust. Help me let go of the worry that's keeping you from acting in my life. She didn't feel immediate peace. She didn't feel her anxiety magically disappear. But she felt something that had been missing for a long time. Hope. Hope that maybe there was a different way to live. Hope that maybe God really could handle what she'd been trying to control. Hope that maybe, just maybe, she could learn to trust instead of worry. It was a beginning, a small, fragile beginning, but it was something. And as Emma finally drifted off to sleep that night, she held on to those words like a lifeline. Your worries keep me from acting. Trust in me. She didn't know it yet, but those words were about to change everything. The morning after hearing God's voice in the church, Emma woke up with those words still echoing in her mind. Your worries keep me from acting. Trust in me. She made coffee and sat by her kitchen window watching the sunrise. The worry was still there. She could feel it like background noise in her brain, but there was something new too, an awareness. A consciousness of how much space the worry was taking up, how much energy it was consuming. She pulled out a notebook and wrote at the top of a blank page, "Things I'm worrying about right now." In dim, the list came quickly. David and whether he'd get another job, her depleted savings, her car that needed new tires, an upcoming evaluation at work, her mom's health, whether she'd said something wrong to a co-worker yesterday. What would happen if she got sick and couldn't work? Whether she'd locked her apartment door properly that morning? She stared at the list. 8 major worries before 8 in the morning. And that didn't even include the smaller, constant anxieties that hummed beneath everything else. God, she whispered, I see it now. This is what you meant. All of this worry. It's like I'm trying to control everything myself. I'm not leaving any room for you to actually work. She thought about the Bible verse she'd read the night before. Can any one of you by worrying add a single hour to your life? Every single worry on her list was about something she couldn't actually control. She couldn't control whether David would keep a job. She couldn't control what happened at her work evaluation. She couldn't control her mom's health or whether her car would break down. All she could control was whether she trusted God with these things or kept trying to manage them through worry. Emma made a decision. She took her pen and next to each worry, she wrote, "Trusting God with this." It felt almost silly, like a childish exercise. But as she wrote the words again and again, something began to shift. Not dramatically, but subtly, like opening a window in a stuffy room. At work that day, Emma tried to practice what she was learning. Every time a worry popped up, and they popped up constantly, she acknowledged it and then consciously chose to release it to God. Patient in room 412 wasn't responding well to treatment. Worry tried to spiral. What if I'm missing something? What if he gets worse? What if his family blames me? But Emma caught herself. God, I'm trusting you with this patient. I'll do my best, but you're in control of the outcome. A co-worker made a comment that could have been interpreted as critical. Worry tried to analyze. What did she mean by that? Is she upset with me? Did I do something wrong? Emma stopped the spiral. God, I'm trusting you with this relationship. If there's an issue, you'll make it clear. It was exhausting at first, this constant catching and releasing of worry. But by the end of her shift, Emma noticed something. She felt lighter, not worry-free, but less burdened, like she'd been carrying a heavy backpack and had started taking things out of it, one item at a time. Her friend and co-worker, Lisa, noticed. They were changing out of their scrubs in the locker room when Lisa said, "You seem different today, less stressed." I'm trying something new, Emma said. Trying to worry less and trust more. Lisa laughed. Good luck with that. If you figure out how to stop worrying as a nurse, please share your secret. Emma smiled, but she was serious about it. This wasn't just about reducing stress. This was about removing the barrier between her and God's ability to work in her life. That evening, David called. Emma's stomach immediately clenched. What crisis was it this time? "Hey, Em, I just wanted to call and say thank you for the money, for always helping me. I know I don't say it enough. "You're welcome," she said, surprised by the gratitude in his voice. "And I got a lead on a job. It's not guaranteed, but it's a good opportunity. Interview is next week." "That's great, David." After they hung up, Emma realized something. She'd been so worried about David, so anxious about enabling him, so stressed about the money, that she hadn't left any space for God to actually work in his situation. But now, choosing to release that worry and trust instead, she was hearing news of possibility. It was a small thing. Maybe the job wouldn't work out, but it was something, a tiny opening where there had been only anxiety before. Over the next few days, Emma continued her practice. Every morning, she'd write her worries in her notebook and then consciously give them to God. Every time anxiety flared up during the day, she'd pause and choose trust. It wasn't easy. Sometimes the worry was so strong it felt impossible to let go. Sometimes she'd release something to God in the morning and find herself worrying about it again by afternoon. But she kept trying, kept choosing trust over and over again. On Wednesday, she had her work evaluation. She'd been dreading it for weeks, running through every possible criticism she might receive, every mistake she might have made. But walking into her supervisor's office, Emma prayed a simple prayer. "God, I'm trusting you with this. Whatever happens, you're in control." The evaluation was actually positive. Her supervisor praised her dedication, her skills, her compassion with patients. There were a few areas to improve. There always were. But overall, it was good. Emma left the office feeling stunned. She'd built this evaluation up into such a catastrophe in her mind, and it had been fine. All that worry had been for nothing, worse than nothing. It had stolen her peace for weeks over something that turned out to be positive. That evening, Emma called her best friend from college, Maya. They'd been close for years, though they lived in different states now. "I had this experience last week," Emma told her. "I was at church, completely overwhelmed, and I heard God speak to me. He said my worries were keeping him from acting, and I needed to trust him." Maya was quiet for a moment. "That's intense. How do you feel about it?" "Honestly, it's been challenging. I'm trying to change a lifetime habit of worrying, but I'm also seeing changes already. Small ones, but real." "Like what?" Emma told her about the evaluation, about David's job lead, about feeling lighter even though her circumstances hadn't drastically changed. "I think I've been operating under this belief that worry equals care," Emma said. "Like if I'm not worrying about something, I'm being irresponsible or uncaring. But I'm realizing that's not true. I can care about things without being consumed by anxiety about them." "That's really mature," Maya said. "I think I do the same thing. Worry feels productive, like you're doing something, but you're right, it's not actually doing anything except making you miserable." After they hung up, Emma thought about what she'd said. Worry feels productive. That was it, exactly. Worry felt like she was preparing, preventing, protecting, but it was an illusion. Worry didn't prevent bad things from happening. It just prevented her from experiencing peace while waiting to see what would happen. On Friday night, Emma attended a women's Bible study at her church. She'd been going sporadically for about a year, but had never really opened up to the group. Tonight felt different. When they asked if anyone had prayer requests or wanted to share, Emma raised her hand. "I've been struggling with worry and anxiety for as long as I can remember," she began, her voice shaking slightly. "And last week, I had this moment where I felt like God told me that my worries were keeping him from acting in my life, that I needed to trust him instead." Several women nodded, their faces reflecting understanding. "I'm trying to learn how to do that," Emma continued. "How to trust instead of worry, but it's hard. I keep slipping back into old patterns." An older woman named Patricia spoke up. "I struggled with that for years, honey. What helped me was realizing that trust isn't a feeling, it's a decision. You might not feel peaceful or confident, but you can still decide to trust God anyway. You can choose it even when everything in you wants to worry. But how do you make that choice when the worry is so strong?" Emma asked. "You just do it over and over and over again. Trust is like a muscle. It gets stronger with practice. Every time you choose to trust instead of worry, you're building that muscle. And eventually it gets easier. Another woman, younger, maybe Emma's age, added, "I started doing this thing where whenever I catch myself worrying, I literally say out loud, 'God, I trust you with this,' even if I don't fully feel it in that moment. Just declaring it helps." Emma took mental notes of everything they shared. She wasn't alone in this struggle. Other women, strong, faithful women, had wrestled with the same thing. After the study, Patricia pulled Emma aside. "Can I tell you something? When I was your age, I worried so much that I made myself physically sick. Ulcers, insomnia, panic attacks. I was trying to control everything through worry, thinking if I just anticipated every problem, I could prevent disaster. But all I was doing was making myself miserable and blocking God's work in my life." "What changed?" Emma asked. "I had a breakdown, literally couldn't function anymore. And in that place of complete helplessness, I finally surrendered. I finally let go. And you know what? God showed up. He provided in ways I never could have orchestrated. He solved problems I'd been worrying about for years. But he couldn't do it until I got out of the way." Emma felt tears building. "I'm afraid of getting to that breaking point." Patricia squeezed her hand. "Then don't wait until you break. Choose to surrender now. Choose to trust now. It's hard, but it's better than the alternative." Driving home, Emma thought about Patricia's words. She'd been heading toward a breakdown. She could feel it. The constant worry was unsustainable. Something had to change. When she got home, Emma did something she'd never done before. She took all her worries, the ones she'd written in her notebook, the ones floating in her mind, the constant background anxiety, and she spoke them out loud. "God, I'm worried about David. I'm worried about money. I'm worried about my job. I'm worried about my mum. I'm worried about my car. I'm worried about everything. And I'm choosing right now to trust you with all of it. I'm releasing my grip on these things. I'm getting out of your way so you can work." She didn't feel an immediate sense of peace. She didn't feel her anxiety vanish. But she felt something equally important. She felt obedient. She was doing what God had asked her to do. She was trusting, even though it was terrifying. That night, Emma slept better than she had in weeks. And when she woke up Saturday morning, the first thought that came to her mind wasn't a worry. It was gratitude. "Thank you, God, for speaking to me. Thank you for showing me a different way to live. Thank you for being patient with me as I learn to trust." It was a small shift. But Emma was beginning to understand that transformation happened in small shifts, in daily decisions, in repeated choices to trust instead of worry. She was learning, and God, she sensed, was just getting started. 2 weeks after God spoke to her in the church, Emma was beginning to see patterns she'd never noticed before. Every time she released a worry to God and chose to trust, something shifted. Not always in her circumstances, but always in her perspective. One Monday morning, she arrived at work to find the hospital in chaos. A major accident on the highway had brought in multiple trauma patients, and the ER was overwhelmed. Normally, this kind of situation would send Emma into panic mode, worrying about making mistakes, about not being fast enough, about patients dying on her watch. But this time, as she put on her scrubs and prepared to enter the chaos, she paused. "God, I trust you. Guide my hands, clear my mind, and help me focus on what you've called me to do right now." The shift was intense. 12 hours of non-stop critical care, life or death decisions, exhausted doctors and nurses working in perfect synchronization. But Emma noticed something different about herself. She was present, focused, not paralyzed by what-ifs or distracted by anxious thoughts. She simply did what needed to be done, one patient at a time, one moment at a time. When her shift finally ended, she sat in her car in the parking lot, stunned by what had just happened. She'd functioned better under pressure than she ever had before, not because the pressure was less, but because the worry that usually accompanied it had been replaced by trust. Lisa knocked on her car window. "You coming out for drinks? Half the staff is going to decompress after that nightmare shift." Emma considered it. Normally, she'd decline, worried about being tired tomorrow, worried about spending money, worried about saying something stupid in front of her co-workers. But tonight, she decided to try something different. "Yeah, I'll come." At the bar, surrounded by her co-workers, Emma actually relaxed. She laughed at jokes, shared stories from the shift, didn't overthink every word she said, and she realized something profound. When she wasn't consumed by worry, she could actually connect with people. Lisa pulled her aside at one point. "I don't know what's different about you lately, but I like it. You seem more here, more yourself." "I'm learning to worry less," Emma said simply. "Teach me," Lisa said, only half joking. On the drive home, Emma thought about Lisa's observation. More herself. Was worry not actually part of who she was? Had she been confusing anxiety with her personality for so long that she didn't know who she was without it? The next day, Emma got a text from David. "Got the job. Start next Monday. Thanks for believing in me, sis." Emma stared at the message, feeling a wave of emotion. She'd been so worried about David, so anxious about enabling him, so stressed about whether helping him was the right thing. And now here he was, landing on his feet, moving forward. She texted back, "I'm so proud of you. You've got this." Then she added to her notebook, "God provided for David. My worry didn't help him. My trust did." That evening her mom called. "Mija, I have to tell you something. I've been putting off going to the doctor because I didn't want to worry you, but I finally went, and they found some things we need to watch." Emma's immediate instinct was to panic. What things? What did watch mean? Was it serious? But she caught herself. "What did they say, Mom? My blood pressure is too high and my cholesterol is elevated. They want me to make some lifestyle changes and come back in 3 months. Not cancer, not a heart attack. Just high blood pressure and cholesterol, manageable, treatable things. That's good that you went, Mom. And those are things you can improve with diet and exercise, right?" Yes, the doctor was actually optimistic about it. After they hung up, Emma realized what had just happened. Her mom had been avoiding the doctor because she didn't want Emma to worry. And Emma had been so consumed with worry that she'd created an environment where her mum felt like she couldn't share health concerns. Her worry hadn't protected anyone. It had just isolated her and burdened others. Emma called her mom back. "Mom, I need to tell you something. I've been struggling with anxiety and worry for a long time, and I think I've made it so that people around me are afraid to tell me things because they don't want to add to my stress." Her mom was quiet for a moment. "You're right, Mija. I didn't want to burden you. You always seem so overwhelmed already. I'm working on that. I'm learning to trust God more instead of trying to control everything through worry. So please, from now on, tell me things, even hard things. I want to be someone people can come to, not someone they have to protect from reality." "I'm proud of you," her mom said softly. "That takes courage." That weekend, Emma decided to do something she'd been putting off for months. Her apartment was full of clutter, things she kept just in case. Clothes she never wore but might need someday, papers she couldn't throw away because what if she needed them later? She realized her physical space reflected her mental state. Holding on to everything out of fear and worry, she spent Saturday cleaning, organizing, and letting go. Every time she hesitated over whether to keep something, she asked herself, "Am I keeping this because I need it, or because I'm worried about a hypothetical future scenario?" Most of the time, it was the latter. By evening, she'd filled 6 garbage bags with things to donate and had a pile of trash on her curb. Her apartment felt lighter, more spacious, more like a home and less like a storage unit for anxieties. Sunday morning, Emma went to church feeling more peaceful than she had in years. During worship, she closed her eyes and just focused on the lyrics, really focusing for the first time, instead of letting her mind wander to her to-do list and worries. The sermon was about Peter walking on water. The pastor focused on the moment when Peter took his eyes off Jesus and started to sink. Peter's problem wasn't that he stepped out of the boat, the pastor said. His problem was that he stopped looking at Jesus and started looking at the storm. He started focusing on what could go wrong instead of on who was calling him forward, and that's when he began to sink. Emma felt like the message was directly for her. How many times had she started to step out in faith, only to immediately focus on all the things that could go wrong? How many times had she sunk, not because God wasn't there, but because she'd taken her eyes off him and put them on her circumstances? After the service, Patricia from the Bible study found her. "How are you doing? Still working on the trust thing?" "Every day," Emma said. "It's getting easier, but I still catch myself worrying constantly." "That's normal. But let me ask you something. Are you seeing God work in ways he wasn't before?" Emma thought about it. David getting a job, her mom going to the doctor, her own ability to be present and connected, the peace she'd experienced during that chaotic shift. Yes, I am." Patricia smiled. "That's what happens when we get out of God's way. He was always there, always ready to work. But our worry blocks us from seeing it, from receiving it. When we trust, we create space for him to move." That evening, Emma was reading her Bible when she came across a verse in Proverbs 3:5-6. "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight." Lean not on your own understanding. That was the core of it. Worry was her trying to understand and control everything through her own limited perspective. Trust was submitting to God's understanding, which was infinitely bigger than hers. She wrote in her journal, "I've been trying to figure everything out, to plan for every possibility, to protect myself from every potential disaster. But I can't see the future. I can't control outcomes. All I can do is trust the one who sees everything, who holds everything, who loves me more than I can comprehend. My worry doesn't help. It just shows I'm still trying to be in control. Trust means letting go of that control and believing God will guide me." Monday brought a new challenge. Emma's car, which she'd been worrying about for months, finally broke down on her way to work. She managed to get it to a shop, and the mechanic gave her an estimate that made her stomach drop. $1,200. Money she didn't have, money she'd given to David, money that represented another problem to worry about. But Emma made a conscious choice. Instead of spiraling into panic, she sat in the mechanic's waiting room and prayed, "God, I don't know how I'm going to pay for this, but you do. I'm trusting you to provide. I'm not going to let this steal my peace. You've got this." She called her supervisor and explained the situation. "I'll need to take a rideshare to work until I can get my car fixed." "Actually," her supervisor said, "Lisa lives near you, doesn't she? Maybe she could give you rides, and you could split gas money?" Emma hadn't even thought of that. She texted Lisa, who immediately agreed. "Of course, I'd love the company. And don't worry about gas money. You can just buy me coffee sometimes." That afternoon, Emma got a call from her bank. "Ms. Rodriguez, we noticed an error in your account. We accidentally charged you twice for your rent payment last month. We're refunding the duplicate charge, $850, which should appear in your account within 2 business days." Emma stared at her phone in disbelief. She'd never even noticed the duplicate charge. But now, when she needed it most, here was money she didn't even know had been taken. Not quite enough for the full car repair, but close. And with Lisa providing rides and not asking for gas money, Emma could afford to get her car fixed without going into debt. She sat in her living room that evening, overwhelmed by what had just happened. God had provided, not in the way she would have planned or expected, but perfectly timed, perfectly sufficient. And she realized something crucial. If she'd been consumed with worry about the car all day, she would have missed the peace of seeing God work. She would have been so focused on the problem that she wouldn't have recognized the provision. Emma pulled out her phone and texted Patricia, "You were right. When I stopped worrying and started trusting, I created space for God to work, and He's showing up in ways I never could have orchestrated." Patricia texted back, "He always does. Keep trusting, sweet girl. You're learning what it means to truly walk by faith." That night, Emma updated her worry list. Not to add new worries, but to mark the ones God had already handled. David's job, check. Mom's health, check. Her work evaluation, check. Her car, in process, but provision already appearing. She was beginning to understand what God had meant that night in the church. Her worries hadn't been helping anything. They'd just been blocking her ability to see and receive what God was already doing. Trust was the key. Not perfect trust, not fearless trust, but simple, daily, repeated trust. Choosing over and over again to believe that God was good, that He was present, that He was working even when she couldn't see it. And the more she practiced trust, the more she saw evidence of His faithfulness, which made it easier to trust the next time, which revealed more of His work, which built more trust. It was a beautiful cycle, the opposite of the vicious cycle of worry she'd been trapped in for so long. Emma was learning, and God, true to His word, was acting. A month into her journey of choosing trust over worry, Emma faced her biggest test yet. Her mom called one evening, and Emma could hear the tremor in her voice immediately. "Mia, I need to tell you something. The doctor called today with results from my follow-up tests. They found something on my mammogram. They want me to come back for more testing." Emma's heart stopped. This was the call every daughter fears. This was the nightmare scenario she'd worried about countless times. "What did they say exactly?" Emma asked, her voice surprisingly steady despite the panic rising in her chest. "They said there's an abnormality. It could be nothing, or it could be something. They won't know until they do a biopsy. I have an appointment next Thursday." After they hung up, Emma sat on her couch as the worry tried to flood in. Cancer. What if it's cancer? What if she has to do chemo? What if she doesn't make it? What if I lose her? But then she remembered. "Your worries keep me from acting. Trust in me." Emma got down on her knees right there in her living room. "God, I'm terrified. This is my mum. This is the worst thing I can imagine. And every part of me wants to spiral into worst-case scenarios. But I'm choosing, right now in this moment, to trust you. I'm choosing to believe that you love my mom even more than I do. I'm choosing to believe that you're in control of this situation. I can't see the outcome, but you can. So I'm trusting you. Help me keep trusting you." The tears came then, but they were different from the tears of panic she'd shed so many times before. These were tears of surrender, of release, of choosing faith in the face of fear. Emma called Maya. "I need you to pray with me. My mom has to go in for more tests. They found something." Maya didn't hesitate. She prayed with Emma right there over the phone, asking God for peace, for clarity, for His presence in the waiting, for healing whatever the outcome might be. When they finished, Maya said, "How are you doing? Really doing? Honestly, I'm scared, but I'm also choosing to trust. I'm not letting the fear become worry that consumes me. I'm just holding on to God and believing He's got this. That's all you can do, and I'm here, whatever you need." The next few days were hard. Emma caught herself starting to worry and had to consciously release it dozens of times a day. But she noticed something. The more she practiced releasing worry and choosing trust, the quicker she could catch herself. At work, she told Lisa what was happening. "I'm trying not to worry, but it's hard when it's your mom, you know?" Lisa hugged her. "Of course it's hard, but I've watched you change so much over the past month. You're stronger than you think." Thursday came, and Emma took the day off to drive her mom to the appointment. They sat in the waiting room together, and Emma could see her mom's hands shaking. "Mom, can I pray with you?" Her mom nodded, tears already forming. Emma took her hands and prayed out loud, right there in the waiting room, not caring who heard. "God, we're scared, but we trust you. We don't know what these tests will show, but you do. We're asking for your peace that passes understanding. We're asking for your healing hand, and we're choosing to trust you no matter what happens. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for loving us. Amen." When her mom came out of the biopsy, she looked exhausted and scared. "Now we wait. They said results in 3 to 5 days. Those 3 to 5 days felt like 3 to 5 years. Emma found herself constantly having to redirect her thoughts. Every time worry tried to spiral, she'd stop and pray. "God, I'm trusting you with this." She journaled every night, writing out her fears and then consciously giving them to God. She called Maya, Patricia, and even Lisa for prayer and support. She went to work and focused on her patients, finding that serving others helped keep her mind from spiraling. On day 4, Emma's mom called. Emma's heart pounded as she answered. "It's benign," her mom said, crying. "It's not cancer, it's just a benign cyst. They said I'm fine." Emma sat down hard, overwhelmed with relief. "Thank you, God," she whispered. "Thank you." "Emma," her mom said, "I have to tell you something. I've been watching how you've handled this. Instead of falling apart like you would have before, you've been strong, peaceful even. What changed?" Emma told her about that night in the church, about God speaking to her, about learning to trust instead of worry. "I'm not perfect at it," Emma said. "This week has been so hard, but I kept choosing to trust, kept releasing the worry, and I can honestly say I have more peace now than I've ever had in a crisis." "You've inspired me," her mum said. "I need to learn to do that too. I've been worried about everything my whole life. Maybe it's time for me to start trusting more." That evening, Emma went back to the church where God had first spoken to her. She sat in the same pew and just wept with gratitude, not just because her mom was okay, but because God had been faithful through the waiting. He hadn't removed the trial, but he'd been present in it. He'd given her peace in the midst of uncertainty. "Thank you," she whispered over and over. "Thank you for teaching me to trust. Thank you for being faithful." The next Sunday, Emma shared her testimony at church. She was nervous, but she felt like God was asking her to be open about what she was learning. "A few months ago, I was paralyzed by worry," she told the congregation. "I worried about everything, all the time, and then God spoke to me and told me that my worries were keeping him from acting, that I needed to trust him." She told them about the journey, about learning to release worry and choose trust. And then she told them about her mom, about how God had walked with her through the scariest week of her life. "I'm not telling you that if you trust God, nothing bad will ever happen," Emma said. "Bad things happen, scary things happen. But I am telling you that when you trust God instead of drowning in worry, he gives you peace that doesn't make sense. He shows up in ways you can't orchestrate. And he's faithful, even when the outcome isn't what you wanted." After the service, at least 10 people came up to her sharing their own struggles with worry and anxiety. One woman in particular, probably in her 50s, grabbed Emma's hands with tears in her eyes. "I've struggled with anxiety my whole life. I thought it was just who I was. But hearing you say that worry keeps God from acting, that changed something in me. I want to learn to trust like you're learning to trust." Emma gave her her phone number. "Let's walk this journey together. We can encourage each other." That week, Emma started what she called a trust group at church, a small gathering of women who struggled with worry and anxiety and wanted to learn to trust God more fully. 12 women showed up to the first meeting. They shared their struggles honestly. They prayed for each other. They held each other accountable. And they practiced together, choosing trust over worry, releasing control to God, believing in his faithfulness even when circumstances were hard. Emma found that leading this group was healing for her too. Teaching others what she was learning helped solidify it in her own heart. And seeing other women begin to experience the same freedom she was finding encouraged her to keep going. Lisa started coming to the group. "I'm not super religious," she admitted at her first meeting. "But I'm drowning in anxiety, and I'm willing to try anything." Over the following weeks, Emma watched Lisa begin to soften, to open up, to consider that maybe there was a God who cared about her worries and wanted to carry them for her. One night after group, Lisa pulled Emma aside. "I think I want to start going to church with you. I don't know what I believe yet, but watching you and these other women, there's something real here, something I want." Emma felt tears building. This was what happened when she got out of God's way. He didn't just work in her life, he worked through her life to touch others. At work, things continued to improve. Emma's supervisor pulled her aside one day. "I've noticed a significant change in your performance and attitude over the past few months. You're more present with patients, more collaborative with the team, more confident in your decisions. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." Emma smiled. I'm learning to trust more and worry less. Her supervisor laughed. In this job? That's impressive. Most nurses I know are chronic worriers. I was too, but I'm learning it doesn't help. It just steals peace without solving anything. That weekend, David came to visit. He'd been at his new job for 6 weeks and was doing well. They met for coffee, and Emma could see a change in him too. I have to thank you, Em, he said. Not just for the money, though that helped, but for believing in me, for not making me feel like a failure every time I messed up. I'm proud of you, David. I know I've let you down a lot, and I know you've worried about me, but I'm trying to do better, not just for you, but for me. I'm learning not to worry so much, Emma said. It wasn't helping you or me, it was just creating stress for everyone. Well, whatever you're doing, it's good. You seem happier, lighter. Emma thought about that word, lighter. Multiple people had used it to describe her lately. She was lighter, not because her circumstances had become easier, but because she wasn't carrying the weight of trying to control everything anymore. That night, Emma wrote in her journal, I'm learning that trust isn't passive, it's active. It's a choice I make over and over again, and the more I choose it, the more I see God work. Not always in ways I expect, not always with outcomes I would have chosen, but always in ways that show me He's present, He's good, and He's faithful. My mom is healthy. David is doing well. Lisa is discovering faith. I'm leading a group of women toward freedom, and I'm experiencing peace I never thought possible. All because I'm learning to get out of God's way and let Him work. She closed the journal and thought about that night in the church when God had first spoken to her. Your worries keep me from acting. Trust in me. He'd been right. Her worries had been keeping Him from acting. But now, as she learned to trust, she was watching Him work in ways that amazed her, in her life, in her relationships, in her mum's health, in the lives of the women in her group. God was acting, and He was faithful, and Emma was finally learning to trust Him with everything. 3 months into her journey of trust, Emma's life looked remarkably different. The constant anxiety that had defined her for so long was being replaced by a growing peace. Not that she never worried, she did. But now she had tools to recognize it and redirect it. One Tuesday morning, Emma arrived at work to find her supervisor waiting for her with an unusual request. Emma, I need to talk to you about something. We're opening a new program for cardiac care patients transitioning from hospital to home care. It's a pilot program, and it needs someone to lead it. Someone compassionate, organized, and trustworthy. I immediately thought of you. Emma's first instinct was to worry. What if I fail? What if I'm not qualified? What if I take it on and it's too much? But she caught herself. Can I have a day to think about it and pray about it? Her supervisor smiled. Of course. Let me know by Thursday. That evening, Emma sat with her journal and wrote out all her thoughts about the opportunity. The fears, the excitement, the questions. And then she wrote at the bottom, God, is this from you? Show me. She called Maya. I got offered a leadership position at work. It's exciting, but scary. How do I know if it's the right thing? Do you have peace about it? Maya asked. Emma thought about it. I have questions, but underneath the questions, yeah, I think I do have peace. Then that's probably your answer. You've been learning to trust God for months now. Trust Him with this too. Wednesday morning, Emma woke up with clarity. This was the opportunity she'd been praying for without even knowing it. A chance to use her skills to help people in a meaningful way. Yes, it was scary, but God had been faithful with everything else. He'd be faithful with this too. She told her supervisor yes on Wednesday afternoon, not waiting until Thursday. I'd love to do it. When do I start? Next month. We'll transition your current responsibilities gradually. That weekend, the trust group met, and Emma shared the news. The women celebrated with her, but one of them, a woman named Jennifer, looked troubled. I'm happy for you, Emma, but I have to be honest. I'm jealous. You're experiencing all this growth and these opportunities, and I'm still stuck in the same patterns. I try to trust, but the worry always comes back. Emma understood that feeling. Jennifer, can I tell you something? 3 months ago, I was exactly where you are, wanting to change but feeling stuck. And I still have days where the worry tries to take over. This isn't about being perfect, it's about practicing. Every time you choose trust over worry, you're making progress even if it doesn't feel like it. Patricia added, and remember, Emma's been at this for months now. You've only been coming to group for a few weeks. Give yourself grace to grow. After the meeting, Emma and Jennifer talked one-on-one. What's your biggest worry right now? Emma asked. My marriage, Jennifer said quietly. My husband and I have been distant for months. We barely talk. I'm worried he's going to leave me, or that we're going to end up divorced like everyone else in my family. Have you talked to him about it? No. I'm afraid if I bring it up, it'll make it real. Like as long as we don't talk about it, maybe it's not as bad as I think. Emma recognized that pattern, avoiding confrontation out of fear, which only made the worry worse. What if the worry is actually keeping God from working in your marriage? Emma asked gently. What if instead of worrying about your husband leaving, you trusted God and actually had an honest conversation with him? Jennifer's eyes filled with tears. That's terrifying. I know, but staying in worry is terrifying too. At least if you talk to him, you're doing something. You're creating space for God to work instead of just being paralyzed by fear. A week later, Jennifer texted Emma, I talked to my husband. It was hard, but we're going to start counseling. Thank you for pushing me. Emma smiled. God was working not just in her life, but through her life. Her own journey from worry to trust was becoming a testimony that helped others. At work, the transition to her new role was both exciting and challenging. Emma had to hire a small team, set up protocols, coordinate with doctors and insurance companies. It was more responsibility than she'd ever had, and the old Emma would have been consumed with anxiety about every decision. But Emma was learning to take things one step at a time, to seek God's wisdom before making decisions, to trust that He would guide her. One afternoon, she was overwhelmed with the scope of what she was trying to build. There was so much to do, so many details to figure out. She felt the familiar panic starting to rise. She closed her office door, got down on her knees and prayed. God, this is bigger than me. I can't do this in my own strength. I need your wisdom, your guidance, your provision. I'm trusting you to show me what to do next. When she opened her eyes, she felt prompted to call a nurse she'd worked with years ago, someone who'd moved to a different hospital. Emma hadn't thought about her in months, but suddenly felt like she should reach out. The nurse, Amanda, answered on the second ring. Emma, this is so random, but I was literally just thinking about you. I've been feeling like I need a change, and I was about to start job hunting. Emma told her about the new program. Would you be interested in hearing more about it? 2 weeks later, Amanda had joined Emma's team, bringing expertise and experience that perfectly complemented what Emma needed. It was a provision Emma never could have orchestrated on her own. God, you're so faithful, Emma whispered as she drove home that evening. Even in the details I don't think to worry about, you're providing. One Saturday, Emma's mom invited her to lunch. They met at a small Mexican restaurant, and Emma immediately noticed something different about her mom. You look good, Mom, really good. Her mom smiled. I've been practicing what you've been teaching me, choosing trust over worry. And mija, it's changing my life. Tell me about it. Well, you know I've always worried about money. Even though your father and I are comfortable, I've always been anxious about running out, about unexpected expenses. But I started giving those worries to God every morning. And you know what happened? What? We got a check in the mail from an old insurance policy your father forgot about. $5,000. Right when I'd been worrying about needing a new roof. It was like God was saying, see, I've got this. You don't need to worry. Emma felt tears building. Her mom was experiencing the same faithfulness, the same provision that came from choosing trust. I'm so happy for you, Mom. I'm happy for both of us, for our whole family. David is doing well, you're thriving at work, and I'm finally learning to let go of worry that's plagued me my whole life. God is good, mija. That night, Emma reflected on how far she'd come. Not just her, but her whole family. Her mom was learning to trust. David was stable and growing. She was in a job she loved, leading a ministry that was helping women find freedom from anxiety, all because she'd learned to get out of God's way. The following week, Lisa came to Emma's apartment for dinner. Lisa had been attending church for a few months now and had recently decided to give her life to Christ. "I want to get baptized," Lisa told Emma over pasta. "Will you be there?" "Are you kidding? I wouldn't miss it." At Lisa's baptism, Emma stood in the front row crying as her friend publicly declared her faith. The pastor asked Lisa to share briefly what brought her to this decision. "I watched my friend Emma transform from someone who was crippled by worry into someone who lives with peace and purpose," Lisa said, "and I wanted what she had. She told me it came from trusting God, so I decided to try it. And He's real. He's changed my life just like He changed hers." After the baptism, Lisa hugged Emma tightly. "Thank you. If you hadn't been willing to share your struggle with worry, if you hadn't been honest about learning to trust, I never would have found Jesus." Emma was overwhelmed. This was why God had taken her through that painful season of anxiety, not to punish her, not because something was wrong with her, but to prepare her to help others. Her mess had become her message. That evening, Emma wrote in her journal, "I used to think my anxiety was my biggest weakness. I was ashamed of how much I worried, embarrassed by my constant fear. But God has taken that weakness and turned it into my greatest ministry. Because I struggled with worry, I can help others who struggle too. Because I learned to trust, I can show others how to trust. None of my pain was wasted. God has used every bit of it for His glory and for the good of others. I'm so grateful." And the trust group continued to grow. What had started with 12 women was now nearly 30. They had to move to a larger room at the church. Women were finding freedom from anxiety, learning to trust God with their marriages, their children, their finances, their health, their futures. Patricia pulled Emma aside one evening. "You know God's called you to this, right? This isn't just a hobby or a side thing. This is ministry. You're helping set people free." Emma had been sensing that too. The more she led the group, the more fulfilled she felt. More than her nursing career, as much as she loved it, this felt like what she was made for. "I don't know what that means practically," Emma admitted. "I can't quit my job. I have bills to pay." "You don't have to have it all figured out right now," Patricia said. "Just stay open to what God might be doing. Trust Him with your calling the same way you've learned to trust Him with your worries." That night, Emma prayed specifically about her future. "God, I don't know where you're leading me, but I'm open. I trust you. Show me what's next." She didn't hear an audible answer, but she felt a deep sense of peace. Whatever came next, God would guide her, just like He'd guided her through every step so far. Emma was learning that trust wasn't just about releasing worry in the present. It was also about surrendering control of the future, about believing that God's plans were better than anything she could dream up on her own. And so far, His plans had been exceed her wildest dreams. 6 months into leading the cardiac care program, Emma faced an unexpected challenge. The hospital administration announced budget cuts and her program was under review. There was a possibility it could be shut down. Emma sat in the meeting, hearing the news, and felt the old familiar anxiety trying to claw its way back. All this work, all these patients who needed this program, all the people she'd hired, what if it all disappeared? But then she caught herself. This was exactly the kind of situation that used to send her into a tailspin of worry. But now, she had a choice. After the meeting, Emma went to the hospital chapel and prayed. "God, I don't understand this. I thought this program was from you. I thought I was doing what you called me to do, but I'm choosing to trust you anyway. If this program is supposed to continue, you'll make a way. If it's not, you have something else. I'm not going to let worry steal my peace." Over the next 2 weeks, Emma focused on gathering data that showed the program's value. Patient outcomes, cost savings, satisfaction surveys. She worked with her team to put together a comprehensive presentation for the board, but she didn't obsess over it. She didn't stay up all night worrying about what might happen. She did her best work and then released the outcome to God. The night before the board meeting, Jennifer from the trust group called her. "I heard about your program being at risk. How are you handling it?" "Honestly, I'm okay. I'm doing everything I can, and I'm trusting God with the result." "Emma, a year ago you would have been a wreck over this." "I know, but I've learned that worry doesn't change outcomes. It just steals peace. So I'm choosing peace." The board meeting went well. Emma presented clearly and confidently, answered questions thoroughly, and made a compelling case for the program. When it was over, the board chair said they'd make a decision within a week. Walking out of that meeting, Emma felt proud of herself, not for the presentation itself, but for how she'd handled the uncertainty. She'd stayed calm, trusted God, and done her best. That was all she could control. 3 days later, she got the call. The program was being kept, not just kept, but expanded. The board had been so impressed with the results that they wanted to add funding to serve more patients. Emma sat at her desk, overwhelmed with gratitude. "Thank you, God, not just for saving the program, but for teaching me to trust you through the uncertainty." That was the real victory. That weekend at the trust group, Emma shared what had happened. "I want you all to know something. This journey of learning to trust isn't about life becoming problem-free. Problems still come, challenges still arise, but when you've practiced trusting God through smaller things, you're ready when bigger things come. I couldn't have handled this situation a year ago. I would have been consumed by worry. But all those months of choosing trust in smaller situations prepared me for this." One of the newer members, a young woman named Sophia, raised her hand. "How do you know when to take action versus when to just trust and wait?" "That's such a good question," Emma said. "And honestly, it's something I'm still learning. But here's what I've figured out so far. Trust doesn't mean passivity. It means doing what's in your power to do and then releasing what's not. I couldn't control the board's decision, but I could prepare a good presentation. I couldn't control the outcome, but I could do my best work. Trust is about doing your part and letting God do his." After the meeting, Sophia pulled Emma aside. "I need to tell you something. I'm pregnant and I'm not married. I'm terrified. My family is going to be so disappointed. I don't know how I'm going to afford a baby. I've been worrying non-stop." Emma hugged her. "First, congratulations. A baby is a gift, even when the circumstances are complicated. Second, you're not alone. We're going to walk through this with you." Over the following weeks, the trust group rallied around Sophia. They threw her a baby shower, helped her find resources, connected her with a Christian pregnancy center, prayed with her about having difficult conversations with her family, and Emma watched Sophia transform. Instead of being paralyzed by worry, she started taking steps forward. She had the conversation with her parents. It was hard, but they were ultimately supportive. She made a plan for maternity leave. She set up her apartment for a baby. "I'm still scared sometimes," Sophia told Emma one day, "but I'm not letting the fear control me anymore. I'm trusting that God has a plan for me and this baby." At work, Emma's expanded program was thriving. She'd hired 3 new staff members and was serving twice as many patients as before. But with growth came new challenges. One of her team members, a nurse named Michael, came to her office clearly upset. "I need to talk to you about something. I've been struggling with anxiety and depression. It's affecting my work and I don't know what to do." Emma listened without judgment as Michael shared his struggle. When he finished, she said, "Thank you for trusting me with this. First thing, you're not alone and this doesn't make you a bad nurse. Second, I've been where you are. Can I share my story with you?" She told Michael about her own journey with anxiety, about learning to trust God, about the practical steps she'd taken, therapy, honest conversations, daily practices of choosing trust. "Would it help if I connected you with some resources?" Emma asked. "And if you want, you could come to our trust group. It's mostly women, but we've had a few men join too." Michael's eyes filled with tears. I thought I had to have it all together. I thought admitting this would mean I was weak or failing. Some of the strongest people I know are the ones who are honest about their struggles, Emma said. Weakness isn't struggling, it's pretending you're not. Michael started coming to the trust group. At first he was quiet, just listening, but gradually he began to open up, to share his own battles with worry and fear. And Emma watched him begin the same journey she'd been on, learning to release control, to trust God, to find peace in the midst of uncertainty. One evening, Emma got a call from a number she didn't recognize. When she answered, a woman's voice said, "Is this Emma Rodriguez? I got your number from Patricia. I'm calling because I'm desperate. I've struggled with anxiety my whole life, and I don't know how to stop." Emma spent an hour on the phone with this stranger, sharing her story, offering hope, praying with her. When they hung up, Emma sat in her apartment feeling the weight of what was happening. God was using her story, her struggle, her journey, her testimony, to reach people she'd never even met. Her willingness to be vulnerable about her anxiety was creating pathways for others to find freedom. She called Maya. "I think God is calling me to do more with this ministry. More than just the weekly group. I don't know what that looks like yet, but I feel it." "Have you thought about writing?" Maya asked. "You could reach so many more people if you wrote about your journey." Emma hadn't considered that, but the idea resonated immediately. "I could write about learning to trust, about releasing worry, about what God's taught me." That night, Emma started writing. Not a book, not yet, but blog posts, sharing her story in pieces. She wrote about the night in the church when God spoke to her, about learning to catch and release worry, about seeing God provide, about helping others find the same freedom. She shared the blog posts with the trust group first, and the response was overwhelming. Women told her they'd read the posts over and over, that they'd shared them with friends, that the words were helping them in their own journeys. Emma created a simple website and started posting regularly. Within weeks, she was getting messages from women across the country who'd found her blog and were encouraged by it. One message in particular struck her. "I've been a Christian my whole life, but I always thought anxiety meant I lacked faith. Your blog helped me understand that struggling with worry doesn't mean I don't trust God. It means I'm human, and I need to practice trust. Thank you for being so honest." Emma showed the message to Patricia. "This is what I was talking about," Patricia said. "God's called you to this. You're helping people find freedom." But even as the ministry grew, Emma faced her own continuing struggles. One particularly difficult week at work, 3 patients in crisis, staff conflicts, insurance complications. Emma found herself slipping back into old patterns of worry. She caught herself lying awake at night, mind racing through problems and worst-case scenarios. The familiar anxiety was creeping back, and it scared her. "God, I thought I was past this," she prayed in frustration. "I've been choosing trust for months. Why is the worry coming back?" In the quiet, she felt God's gentle response. "You're not failing. You're human. Trust isn't something you achieve once and never have to practice again. It's a daily choice, sometimes an hourly choice. Keep choosing me." Emma realized she'd started to think of herself as cured of anxiety. But that wasn't how it worked. Growth wasn't linear. There would be setbacks, hard weeks, moments when the old patterns tried to return. The difference now was that she knew what to do. She didn't have to stay in the worry spiral. She could recognize it, redirect it, and choose trust again. At the next trust group meeting, Emma was honest about her hard week. "I want you all to know something. I'm not perfect at this. I still have times when worry tries to take over. But the difference is, I don't stay there anymore. I know how to get out. And that's what I want for all of you. Not perfection, but progress. Not never worrying, but knowing how to choose trust when worry comes." The women in the group seemed relieved by her honesty. They'd been putting Emma on a pedestal, thinking she'd conquered anxiety completely. Knowing she still struggled sometimes made the journey feel more attainable for them. That night, Emma added to her journal, "I'm learning that transformation isn't about reaching a point where you never struggle. It's about developing tools to handle the struggle when it comes. It's about knowing that one bad week doesn't erase months of growth. It's about giving yourself grace to be human while still choosing to trust God. I'm not who I was a year ago, but I'm also not who I'll be a year from now. I'm still growing, still learning, still choosing trust one day at a time. She thought about how far she'd come, from that desperate night in the church to now, leading a program at work, running a ministry, helping people find freedom, writing words that encouraged thousands, all because she'd learned to get out of God's way. All because she'd chosen trust over worry, and the journey wasn't over. God was still working, still teaching, still faithful, and Emma was still learning to trust him with everything. Nearly a year after God spoke to Emma in that empty church, she received an unexpected email. It was from a publishing house that had found her blog. "We love your vulnerability and the practical wisdom you share about anxiety and faith. Have you ever considered writing a book?" Emma stared at the email in disbelief. A book? She was just a nurse who'd learned to worry less. Who was she to write a book? But even as the doubts came, she recognized them for what they were, old patterns of insecurity trying to resurface. She'd learned to identify the difference between godly humility and fear-based self-doubt. She called Maya. "I got offered a book deal. Well, they asked if I'd consider it. I don't even know what that means practically." "Emma, this is incredible. What's holding you back?" "Fear, I guess. Fear that I'm not qualified, that I don't have enough to say, that I'll fail." "Those are worries," Maya pointed out gently. "And what have you learned about worries?" Emma laughed. "That they keep God from acting, that I need to trust instead." "So what are you going to do?" Emma took a deep breath. "I'm going to pray about it, and if I feel peace, I'm going to say yes." That evening, Emma sat with her journal and wrote out all her thoughts. The fears, the excitement, the questions. And then she prayed, "God, is this from you? Is this what you want me to do? If it is, I'll need your help with every word. I can't do this on my own." She felt a clear sense of peace. This was a yes. Emma replied to the publisher saying she was interested. Over the next few weeks, they worked out a contract. She'd write a book about her journey from worry to trust, offering both her personal story and practical guidance for others. The advance wasn't huge, but it was enough that Emma could cut back her hours at the hospital to have time to write. When she told her supervisor, he was supportive. "You've built something special here, Emma. And you've trained your team well. They can handle things if you need to step back a bit. This book sounds important." Writing the book was harder than Emma expected, not because she didn't have things to say, but because putting her struggle into words forced her to relive it. She had to go back to that desperate night in the church, to the panic and fear she'd felt. She had to be vulnerable about her failures and setbacks, but she also got to celebrate the victories, got to document God's faithfulness in detail, got to share the stories of how trust had transformed not just her life, but the lives of the women in her group. One afternoon, Emma was stuck on a chapter about dealing with setbacks. She'd been staring at a blank screen for an hour when her phone rang. It was Jennifer from the Trust Group. "Emma, I have to tell you something amazing. Remember how my husband and I started counseling? Well, we just had our best conversation in years. We're actually connecting again. I feel like we're falling in love all over again." Emma felt tears building. "Jennifer, that's beautiful. And it's all because I stopped worrying about him leaving and started trusting God with our marriage. The worry was actually creating distance between us. When I let it go and started being present with him, everything changed." After they hung up, Emma knew exactly what to write in that chapter about setbacks. She wrote about Jennifer's journey, about how trust transformed her marriage, about how letting go of worry created space for God to work and for relationships to heal. The Trust Group continued to grow. They now had 40 women attending regularly, and Emma had trained 3 other leaders to help facilitate. The group was becoming something bigger than she'd ever imagined. One evening, a woman named Carol shared her story. 6 months ago, I was planning to end my life. The anxiety was so bad I couldn't see a way forward. But a friend dragged me to this group, and I heard Emma talk about learning to trust God. I decided to try it. I'm not going to tell you it's been easy, but I'm still here, and I'm starting to believe life is worth living." Emma was undone. This was why God had taken her through her own dark season, so she could be a light for others in theirs. After the meeting, Emma and Carol talked privately. "Thank you for being brave enough to share that," Emma said. "And thank you for choosing life. Thank you for giving me hope," Carol said. "Your story made me believe change was possible." At work, the cardiac care program was being recognized nationally. Emma was invited to speak at a healthcare conference about the program's success. Standing in front of hundreds of healthcare professionals, Emma shared not just the clinical outcomes, but the philosophy behind the program, treating the whole person, not just the disease, addressing anxiety and worry as barriers to healing. After her presentation, several people approached her wanting to implement similar programs at their hospitals. Emma exchanged contact information, agreeing to consult with them. On the flight home, Emma reflected on how much her life had changed. A year and a half ago, she'd been paralyzed by anxiety, barely functioning. Now she was writing a book, leading a ministry, speaking at conferences, helping patients and healthcare professionals across the country, all because she'd learned to trust instead of worry. But even with all the success, Emma still had hard days. One particularly difficult week, she lost a patient she'd been working with closely. Despite everyone's best efforts, the woman's heart had simply given out. Emma sat in her car after work, grieving. She'd known the risks, had done everything she could, but it still hurt, and the worry tried to creep in. What if she'd missed something? What if she'd failed this patient? But she caught herself. "God, I'm sad. I'm grieving. But I'm not going to let this turn into destructive worry. I did my best. You were there with her. You're here with me. I trust you." She called Patricia, who listened and prayed with her. "You're allowed to grieve without it being worry," Patricia reminded her. "Sadness over loss is human and healthy. It's when we spiral into what-ifs and self-blame that it becomes worry. You're doing it right." That Sunday, Emma was baptizing Sophia's baby. Sophia had asked Emma to be the godmother, and Emma stood at the front of the church, holding the tiny infant while the pastor prayed. Looking at this baby, born into uncertain circumstances, now surrounded by a community that had rallied around her mother, Emma felt overwhelmed with gratitude. This child existed in part because the trust group had supported Sophia, because women had learned to trust God with their own struggles and therefore had capacity to help others. After the baptism, Sophia hugged Emma tightly. "A year ago, I thought my life was over when I found out I was pregnant. I was so scared, so worried. But you taught me to trust God. And look, I have this beautiful baby. I have a community. I have hope. Thank you." Emma's mom attended the baptism too. Afterward, she pulled Emma aside. "Mija, I'm so proud of you, not just for what you're accomplishing, but for who you're becoming. You're free in a way you've never been before." "We're both free, Mom. We're learning together." Her mom smiled. "You're right. And I have to tell you, your father and I have been praying about something. We want to support your ministry financially. Not a lot, but enough that you can cut back your hours even more if you need to focus on the book and the trust group." Emma was stunned. "Mom, you don't have to do that. We want to. God has blessed us, and we want to bless what He's doing through you." That night, Emma worked on her book with tears streaming down her face. God's provision kept showing up in unexpected ways. Her parents' support, the book advance, the speaking opportunities. He was making ways she couldn't have imagined. She wrote about it in the chapter on God's faithfulness. When we trust God and get out of His way, He doesn't just meet our needs. He exceeds them. He provides in ways we couldn't have orchestrated or even thought to ask for. Not because we earned it or deserve it, but because He's good, because He delights in taking care of His children. As Emma approached the one-year anniversary of starting the trust group, she decided to host a special celebration meeting. She invited all the women who'd ever attended, even those who'd moved away or stopped coming. Over 70 women showed up. They shared testimonies of transformation, of marriages healed, of anxiety overcome, of faith deepened. They laughed and cried and celebrated together. At the end of the evening, Emma stood before them. "A year and a half ago, I was sitting alone in this church, completely broken, drowning in worry. I heard God speak to me that night. He said my worries were keeping him from acting, and I needed to trust him. I had no idea what would happen if I obeyed. I couldn't have imagined this. All of you, all these stories of freedom, all this evidence of God's faithfulness." She paused, emotion overwhelming her. "Thank you for walking this journey with me. Thank you for being brave enough to face your own worries and choose trust. Thank you for showing up, for being honest, for encouraging each other. This group isn't about me. It's about all of us learning together what it means to trust God fully." Patricia stood up. "Can I say something? Emma, you've changed so many lives, but I want you to know something. God chose you for this, not in spite of your struggle with anxiety, but because of it. Your willingness to be vulnerable about your weakness has become your greatest strength. You've shown all of us that God can use anyone who's willing to trust him." The room erupted in applause, and Emma felt the weight of what God had done. He'd taken her mess and made it a message. He'd taken her weakness and made it a ministry. He'd taken her worry and taught her to trust, then used that transformation to help countless others. Later that night, alone in her apartment, Emma opened her journal and wrote, "1 year ago today, I started the trust group. I had no idea what I was doing, but I knew God had asked me to share what I was learning. Now look at what he's done. 70 women gathered tonight to celebrate freedom from anxiety, 70 testimonies of God's faithfulness. And this is just the beginning. The book will reach even more people. God, thank you for taking my struggle and using it for your glory. Thank you for teaching me that worry keeps you from acting, and trust creates space for miracles. Thank you for being faithful every single step of this journey." She closed the journal and thought about that night in the church when everything changed. She'd been so desperate, so broken, so afraid, but God had met her in that desperation and spoken words that transformed everything. "Your worries keep me from acting. Trust in me." He'd been right. And as Emma continued to trust, he continued to act in ways that amazed her daily. Writing the book consumed Emma's life in the best possible way. She cut her hospital hours to part-time and spent her mornings writing, pouring out everything she'd learned about worry, trust, and God's faithfulness. But 3 months into the writing process, Emma hit a wall. She'd written about her own journey, but the book felt incomplete. Something was missing. She called her editor, a kind woman named Rebecca. "I feel stuck. The book has my story, but it feels like it needs something more." "What if you included stories from the women in your group?" Rebecca suggested. "With their permission, of course. Show that this isn't just your experience. It's a journey many women are on." Emma loved the idea. She reached out to women from the trust group, asking if they'd be willing to share their stories. The response was overwhelming. Women were eager to share how learning to trust had transformed their lives. Jennifer's story of her marriage being restored, Carol's story of choosing life over suicide, Sophia's story of facing single motherhood with faith instead of fear. Story after story of God's faithfulness when women chose to trust him with their worries. Emma wove these testimonies throughout the book, and suddenly it came alive. It wasn't just her story anymore. It was a collective testimony of what happened when women stopped letting worry keep God from acting. One afternoon, Emma was writing at a coffee shop when a young woman approached her table. "Excuse me, are you Emma Rodriguez?" Emma looked up surprised. "Yes, I read your blog. It literally saved my life. I was struggling with panic attacks so bad I couldn't leave my house. But your posts about choosing trust helped me start taking steps forward. I'm in therapy now and I'm getting better. I just wanted to say thank you." Emma stood and hugged this stranger. "Thank you for telling me. That means more than you know." After the woman left, Emma sat back down with tears in her eyes. This was why she was writing the book. This was why God had taken her through her own struggle, so she could help others find their way out of theirs. That week, Emma got news that shook her. David had been in a car accident. He was okay, no major injuries, but his car was totaled, and he'd lost his job because he couldn't get to work. Emma's immediate reaction was worry. Here we go again. He's going to need money. He's going to spiral. This is going to set him back months. But she caught herself. This was exactly the kind of situation where she had to practice what she preached. She couldn't control what happened to David. She could only control her response to it. She called him. "David, I heard about the accident. Are you okay?" "Physically, yeah, but I just got my life together and now this. I don't know what to do." "Here's what we're going to do. We're going to trust God with this. You did nothing wrong. This was an accident. And we're going to believe that God has a plan even in this." "How can you be so calm?" David asked. "A year ago you would have been freaking out." "I've learned that freaking out doesn't help, but trust does. So let's pray right now, and then let's figure out practical next steps." They prayed together over the phone, and Emma could hear David's voice shake with emotion. When they finished, she asked, "Okay, what do you need immediately?" "A way to get to job interviews, and probably money for a down payment on a used car eventually. Can you use rideshare apps for now? I can help with that. You've already helped me so much. I hate asking for more." "David, I'm not helping you out of obligation or worry. I'm helping you because I love you, and because I trust God to provide for both of us. Let me transfer money for rideshares this week and we'll figure out the rest as we go." After they hung up, Emma prayed specifically about David's situation. "God, I'm trusting you with this. Show him your faithfulness, provide for his needs, and help me support him without trying to control or fix everything." 2 days later, David called with excitement in his voice. "You're not going to believe this. Remember my boss from 2 jobs ago? The one I really liked but had to leave because of the commute? He called me out of the blue. They have an opening and he wants me to come back, and it's close enough to my apartment that I could bike there while I save for a car." "David, that's amazing." "It's God, I know it is. The timing is too perfect to be coincidence." Emma smiled. This was what happened when she stopped worrying and started trusting. God worked not just in her life, but in the lives of people she cared about. At work, Emma's cardiac care program was being featured in a national healthcare journal. The article highlighted not just the medical outcomes, but the holistic approach, addressing mental health, anxiety, and worry as part of cardiac recovery. Her supervisor showed her the article with pride. "Emma, this is bringing attention to our hospital. We're getting calls from facilities across the country wanting to learn about our program." "It's pretty surreal," Emma admitted. 2 years ago, I was barely holding my own life together. Now, I'm being recognized nationally for helping others. You should be proud of what you've built." Emma thought about that phrase, "what you've built," but she knew the truth. She hadn't built anything. God had built it through her when she'd gotten out of his way. That evening at the trust group, Emma shared the news about the article. "I want you all to know something. This recognition, this success, it's not because I'm special or because I have everything figured out. It's because I learned to let God work instead of trying to control everything through worry. And every single one of you can experience the same thing in your own lives. When you trust God and get out of his way, he does things you never could have orchestrated." A new woman named Brenda spoke up. "Can I ask a hard question? What about when you trust God and things still go wrong? What about when you pray and the outcome isn't what you wanted?" Emma nodded. "That's a really important question. And I have to be honest, I don't have a perfect answer. But here's what I'm learning. Trusting God isn't about him giving us everything we want. It's about believing he's good and present even when outcomes aren't what we hoped for. It's about having peace in the process, not just peace in perfect outcomes." Patricia added, "I lost my husband 5 years ago to cancer. We prayed, we trusted God, and he still died. But here's the thing, even in that grief, even in that loss, I experienced God's presence and peace in ways I never had before. Trust doesn't guarantee the outcome we want. It guarantees that God walks with us through whatever comes." The room was quiet, everyone processing these words. Then Carol spoke. "I think that's what I needed to hear. I've been trying to trust God so that my life will be perfect. But maybe trust is about knowing He's with me even when life is hard." "Exactly," Emma said. "Trust is the foundation that holds us when everything else is shaking." Later that week, Emma finished the first draft of her book. She read through it one more time, amazed by what had poured out. It was honest, vulnerable, practical, and full of hope. She sent it to Rebecca, who called her 2 days later. "Emma, this is beautiful. It's exactly what women need to hear. I cried 3 times reading it." "Really? Really? You've written something that could genuinely help thousands of women find freedom from anxiety. I'm so excited for this book to get into the world." Emma sat with that reality. A book, her book, about her struggle and God's faithfulness. It felt surreal. That Sunday, the pastor at Emma's church asked if she'd share a brief testimony during the service. Emma agreed, though she was nervous about speaking to the whole congregation. Standing at the front of the church, looking at hundreds of faces, Emma took a deep breath and began. "Almost 2 years ago, I sat in that back pew right there, completely broken by anxiety. I was drowning in worry about everything, and I couldn't see a way forward. That night, God spoke to me. He said my worries were keeping Him from acting, and I needed to trust Him." She shared her journey, the struggle, the slow transformation, the program at work, the trust group, the book. "I'm not standing here because I conquered anxiety. I'm standing here because I learned to trust God with it, and I want you all to know, whatever you're worried about right now, whatever is keeping you up at night, whatever seems too big to handle, your worry isn't helping. It's just keeping God from working. But when you trust Him, when you get out of His way, He moves in ways you never imagined possible." After the service, dozens of people came up to her. Men and women, young and old, all sharing their own struggles with worry and anxiety. Emma listened to each one, prayed with them, and invited them to the trust group, or pointed them to resources that might help. An older man, probably in his 70s, grabbed her hand. "I've been a Christian for 50 years, and I've struggled with anxiety my whole life. I thought something was wrong with my faith. But hearing you say that worry keeps God from acting, that changed my whole perspective. Thank you." Emma drove home that afternoon, feeling overwhelmed with gratitude. God was using her story to help so many people. People she never would have reached if she hadn't been willing to be vulnerable about her struggle. That evening, she video called Maya. "I shared my testimony at church today. It was scary but amazing." "How'd it go?" So many people came up to me afterward, sharing their own struggles. "Maya, I think everyone deals with worry and anxiety to some degree, but nobody talks about it, especially not in church. People think if they're anxious, it means they don't have enough faith. And you're helping change that narrative," Maya said. "You're showing people that anxiety is part of being human, and learning to trust God is a journey, not a destination. I just hope the book helps even more people." "It will. I know it will." Later that night, Emma wrote in her journal, "I used to be ashamed of my anxiety. I thought it was a weakness, a failing, evidence that I wasn't spiritual enough. But God has shown me that my struggle was actually a gift. Not because anxiety itself is good, but because walking through it and learning to trust taught me things I never would have learned otherwise. And now I get to share those lessons with others. My weakness has become my ministry. My struggle has become my testimony. And I'm so grateful that God didn't waste any of my pain. He's used every bit of it for good." She closed the journal and thought about that night in the church when everything changed. If someone had told her then what her life would look like 2 years later, she never would have believed it. But God had been faithful. Every step of the way, He'd been faithful. And Emma knew He would continue to be faithful in whatever came next. 6 months after finishing the book, Emma held the first printed copy in her hands. It was real, tangible. Her story, her struggle, her testimony bound between covers with her name on it. The title read, "Your Worries Keep Me From Acting, A Journey from Anxiety to Trust." Emma sat in her apartment staring at it, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you, God. Thank you for taking my mess and making something beautiful out of it." The book launch was scheduled for the following month. Rebecca had arranged for Emma to do a series of interviews and speaking engagements to promote it. The thought was both exciting and terrifying. "What if people don't like it?" Emma confessed to Patricia over coffee. "What if it doesn't help anyone? What if I put my whole story out there and it falls flat?" Patricia smiled knowingly. "Those are worries, Emma. What do we do with worries?" Emma laughed. "We release them to God and trust Him with the outcome." "Exactly. You did your part. You wrote an honest, helpful book. Now let God do His part with it." The book launched on a Tuesday in October. Emma did several podcast interviews, a few local TV appearances, and spoke at a women's conference. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within the first week, women from across the country were emailing her, messaging her on social media, sharing how the book had impacted them. One email in particular moved Emma deeply. "I've been a pastor's wife for 20 years. I've hidden my anxiety behind a smile because I thought I had to be strong for everyone else. Your book gave me permission to be human, to struggle, and to trust God with my weakness. For the first time in years, I feel hope. Thank you." Emma shared the email with the trust group. "This is why we're doing this. This pastor's wife, who felt like she had to be perfect, now she knows she doesn't have to carry everything alone." The book began climbing bestseller lists. Not massive success, but steady, organic growth as women read it and recommended it to friends. Churches started using it for women's groups. Counselors began recommending it to clients struggling with anxiety. Emma's speaking invitations increased dramatically. She was asked to speak at churches, conferences, retreats, and even a few healthcare organizations interested in the connection between anxiety and physical health. At one speaking engagement, a woman approached Emma afterward. "I'm a therapist who specializes in anxiety disorders. I wanted you to know that what you've written isn't just spiritually sound, it's clinically sound. You're teaching cognitive behavioral techniques wrapped in faith. It's brilliant." Emma was humbled. "I didn't set out to write something clinical. I just shared what God taught me. That's what makes it powerful. You're not just giving techniques, you're offering transformation rooted in relationship with God." Despite the success, Emma continued working part-time at the hospital. She loved patient care and didn't want to lose touch with that part of herself, but she did scale back to focus more on the ministry. The trust group had grown so large that they'd split into 3 groups meeting at different times. Emma trained 6 women to lead groups, and they'd started offering them in Spanish and Korean to reach more women in the community. One evening, Michael, the nurse who joined the group months earlier, asked to speak to Emma privately. "I wanted to tell you something. A year ago, I was planning to quit nursing. The anxiety was so bad I couldn't function, but you helped me understand that I could be a good nurse and still struggle with anxiety. That seeking help didn't mean I was weak. I just got promoted to charge nurse, and I credit you with helping me get here." Emma hugged him. "I'm so proud of you, but you did the work. You chose to trust and take steps forward, because you showed me it was possible." And these conversations, these testimonies of transformation, filled Emma with gratitude. She wasn't changing lives through her own power. She was simply being obedient to what God had called her to, and He was doing the rest. One afternoon, Emma got a call from a woman named Teresa who'd read the book. "I need help. My daughter is 15 and has severe anxiety. She won't leave her room. I don't know what to do." Emma talked with Teresa for over an hour, sharing resources, offering encouragement, and praying with her. She also connected Teresa with a Christian counselor who specialized in adolescent anxiety. A month later, Teresa called back. "My daughter is getting help. She's still struggling, but she's making progress, and your book helped me understand what she's going through." I was making it worse by constantly worrying about her, by trying to fix everything. Now I'm learning to support her while trusting God. Thank you." Emma's mum called one evening with her own update. "Mija, your father and I have been talking. We want to start a trust group for seniors at our church. So many older people struggle with anxiety, about health, about money, about being a burden to their children. Would you be willing to help us get it started?" Emma was thrilled. "Of course, Mom. I'd love to help." She spent several hours with her parents, training them on how to facilitate a group, sharing resources, and helping them understand the dynamics of group ministry. Watching her parents step into this role filled Emma with joy. "You've inspired us," her mom said. "We're both learning to trust more, and we want to help others do the same." David called with his own good news. "Em, I saved enough to buy a car, a used one, but it runs great. And I got a raise at work. Things are really coming together. I'm so proud of you, David. I know you are, but more than that, I'm proud of me, and I'm grateful for how you've supported me without enabling me. You let me learn from my mistakes while still believing in me. That made all the difference." Emma thought about how differently things could have gone. If she'd stayed trapped in worry about David, she would have either enabled his dysfunction or cut him off out of frustration. But learning to trust God with him had allowed her to support him in healthy ways. One Saturday, Emma was invited to speak at a large women's conference. Over 3,000 women attended. Standing backstage, waiting to go on, Emma felt the familiar flutter of nerves. "God, I'm nervous, but I'm trusting you. Give me the words these women need to hear." She walked onto the stage and shared her story, the whole story, holding nothing back. The panic, the desperation, the moment God spoke, the journey of learning to trust. She was vulnerable about her continued struggles, honest about the fact that she still had to choose trust daily. When she finished, the room erupted in applause. But it wasn't for her, it was recognition. 3,000 women recognizing themselves in her story, recognizing the worry they carried, recognizing the possibility of freedom. After the conference, Emma's book sales spiked. The publisher called asking about a second book. "Women are resonating with your message. They want more." Emma was overwhelmed. A second book? She'd barely processed the success of the first one. But as she prayed about it, she felt God's gentle nudge. There was more to say, more stories to share, more practical guidance to offer. She said yes to the second book. This one focused specifically on practical tools for daily trust. That evening, Emma video called Maya. "This is all happening so fast. Sometimes I feel like I'm living someone else's life." "You're living the life God always had planned for you," Maya said. "You just couldn't see it through the worry before." "I guess that's true. I never would have imagined any of this 2 years ago. That's because you were trying to imagine your future through the lens of anxiety. Now you're seeing what God can do when we get out of his way." Emma thought about that. It was true. When she'd been consumed by worry, she couldn't imagine a positive future. All she could see were problems and disasters. But trust had opened her eyes to possibilities she never would have dreamed of. At the next trust group meeting, Emma shared about the conference and the second book. "I want you all to know something. What's happening in my life, this isn't special or unique to me. God wants to do amazing things in all of your lives, but worry blocks that. When we trust him, when we get out of his way, he moves in ways we can't imagine." Sophia raised her hand. "Can I share something? A year ago, I was terrified about being a single mum. I worried constantly about how I'd provide for my baby, how I'd handle everything alone. But Emma taught me to trust God. And you know what? I'm not alone. This community has rallied around me. God has provided in ways I never expected. My baby is healthy and happy, and I have peace I never thought possible." Several other women shared similar testimonies. Jennifer about her restored marriage, Carol about choosing life and finding purpose, Brenda about facing her husband's job loss without falling apart. Emma listened to each story with tears in her eyes. These women had learned what she'd learned, that trust transformed everything. After the meeting, a woman Emma didn't recognize approached her. "I'm visiting from out of state. I read your book and had to come see the group you talk about. Can I tell you something? I'm a psychologist. I've been treating anxiety disorders for 20 years, and what you're doing here, combining clinical best practices with deep faith, it's remarkable. You're giving women both the spiritual foundation and the practical tools they need." Emma was humbled by the affirmation. "I'm just sharing what God taught me." That's what makes it powerful. It's authentic, it's real. It's not just theory, it's lived experience. That night, Emma sat in her apartment reflecting on the past 2 years. From that desperate night in the church to now, best-selling author, sought-after speaker, leader of a growing ministry. But more importantly, woman learning to trust, woman experiencing peace, woman helping others find freedom. She opened her journal and wrote, "God, 2 years ago you told me my worries were keeping you from acting. You asked me to trust you. I had no idea what that would mean or where it would lead. But you've been so faithful. You've transformed my life in ways I never could have imagined. You've used my struggle to help thousands of women. You've taken my mess and made it a ministry. Thank you for not giving up on me when I was drowning in anxiety. Thank you for speaking to me that night. Thank you for teaching me to trust. And thank you for proving over and over again that you're faithful when we get out of your way and let you work." She closed the journal, turned off the lights, and got ready for bed. As she lay there in the dark, she thought about all the women reading her book right now, all the women learning to trust, all the women discovering that God was faithful when they released their worries to Him. And she smiled, knowing that this was just the beginning of what God wanted to do. 2.5 years after that night in the church, Emma found herself back in that same pew. But this time, she wasn't alone and broken. She was here with purpose, with gratitude, with a heart full of testimony. The church had asked Emma to lead a special evening service focused on anxiety and mental health. They wanted her to share her full story and minister to people who were struggling. Emma sat in that back pew for a few minutes before the service started, remembering. She remembered the desperation she'd felt sitting here, the tears she'd cried, the moment God spoke to her. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for meeting me here. Thank you for changing my life." The sanctuary filled with people. Emma recognized faces from the trust group, co-workers from the hospital, people from the community who'd read her book. But there were also strangers, people who'd come because they were desperate, just like she had been. Emma stood at the front and began to speak. 2.5 years ago, I sat in that back pew right there, completely consumed by anxiety. I worried about everything, all the time, and I was exhausted from trying to control everything, from carrying burdens I was never meant to carry, from living in constant fear of what might happen. She shared the whole story, every detail, every struggle, every breakthrough. She talked about the moment God spoke to her, about what those words meant, about the journey of learning to trust. "God told me that my worries were keeping Him from acting," Emma said. "And I had to really sit with that. How could my worries keep an almighty God from doing anything? But I came to understand that it wasn't that God couldn't act. It was that my worry created a barrier. My worry showed I was trying to be in control. My worry showed I wasn't creating space for God to work." She paused, looking at the faces before her. "When I started releasing my worries and choosing trust instead, God began to move in my life in ways I never could have orchestrated. Not because I suddenly had perfect faith, but because I got out of His way." Emma shared about David getting jobs, her mom's health scare that turned out fine, the cardiac care program, the trust group, the book, all the ways God had shown His faithfulness. "I'm not standing here to tell you that if you trust God, nothing bad will ever happen. Bad things happen. Life is hard. But I am telling you that when you trust God, instead of drowning in worry, He gives you peace that transcends circumstances. He shows up in ways you can't plan for, and He's faithful, even when outcomes aren't what you wanted." After she spoke, Emma invited people to come forward for prayer. Dozens of people came, some crying, some desperate, some just tired of living under the weight of constant worry. Emma prayed with each person individually, listening to their struggles, offering hope, pointing them toward resources. She wasn't alone. Women from the trust group were there too, praying with people, sharing their own testimonies, offering support. One woman grabbed Emma's hands. "I've been struggling with panic attacks for 10 years. I've tried everything. I'm at the end of my rope." Emma looked into her eyes. "I understand. I've been there. But I want you to know something. There is hope. You're not broken beyond repair. You're not too far gone. God can meet you in your panic, and He can teach you to trust, even when everything in you wants to spiral." They prayed together, and Emma gave the woman information about the trust group and recommended a Christian counselor. "You don't have to walk this alone," Emma told her. After the service, Emma stood outside the church talking with people until nearly midnight. Everyone who wanted to talk, everyone who needed prayer, everyone who wanted to share their story. She made time for each one. When the last person finally left, Patricia found Emma. "You know what I see when I look at you?" "What?" "Freedom. Complete freedom. Not because you never struggle anymore, but because you know what to do when you do struggle. You've learned to trust so deeply that anxiety doesn't control you anymore." Emma thought about that. It was true. She still had moments of worry, still had days when anxiety tried to creep back in, but it didn't have power over her anymore. She knew how to recognize it, redirect it, and choose trust instead. The next day, Emma got an email from a woman in Australia who'd read her book. "Your book changed my life. I've started a trust group in my church based on what you shared. We have 20 women attending, all learning to release worry and trust God. Thank you for being obedient to share your story." Emma stared at the email in awe. Australia. Her testimony was reaching people on the other side of the world. God was using her story in ways she couldn't have imagined. Over the following weeks, Emma received similar messages from women in South Africa, Brazil, the Philippines, the UK. The book had been translated into several languages, and trust groups were forming in countries Emma had never visited. "God, this is so much bigger than me," Emma prayed one evening. "You've taken my small act of obedience and multiplied it across the globe. Thank you." At work, Emma made a decision. After much prayer and counsel, she decided to leave her nursing position to focus full-time on the ministry. It was terrifying, giving up the stability and income of her nursing career, but she felt God's clear leading. Her supervisor was disappointed, but supportive. "You've built something special here, Emma, and I understand that you're being called to something bigger, but we'll miss you." Emma's last day at the hospital was emotional. Her co-workers threw her a party, and several of them shared how she'd impacted their lives. Michael gave a speech that made everyone cry. "Emma showed me that strength isn't pretending you don't struggle. Strength is being honest about your struggle and choosing to trust God through it." She changed the culture of this hospital by being vulnerable, by being real, by being human. And she's going to change countless more lives through her ministry. Lisa hugged Emma tightly. "You know, I only started believing in God because of you, right? Because you were so real about your struggle and so clear about what changed you. Thank you for that gift." Emma drove home from the hospital for the last time, feeling a mix of sadness and excitement. One chapter closing, a new one beginning. The second book was nearly finished. This one was more practical. Daily exercises for choosing trust, prayers for specific worries, stories from women who'd found freedom. Emma had poured everything she'd learned into it. Rebecca called with exciting news. "Major retailers want to feature your first book prominently. We're doing a second printing of 50,000 copies. Emma, this is really taking off." Emma was humbled. "I never imagined any of this." "That's because you were worried about your own life," Rebecca said. "You couldn't see what God wanted to do through you, but now that you've learned to trust, look at what's happening." That weekend, Emma's family gathered for dinner at her parents' house. Her mum and dad shared about their seniors trust group, which now had 30 members. David shared about his job and his new girlfriend, a woman from his church who was kind and stable. Everyone was doing well. Her mum raised a glass. "I want to propose a toast to Emma, who taught our whole family what it means to truly trust God. You didn't just change your own life, Misha. You changed all of ours." Emma felt tears building. "I didn't do anything special. I just learned to get out of God's way." "That's everything," her dad said. "That's what most people never learn. They spend their whole lives trying to control everything, worrying about everything, carrying burdens they were never meant to carry. You learned to let God be God. And look at what He's done." That night, Emma sat in her apartment, working on the final chapter of her second book. She wrote, "Trust isn't something you achieve once and never have to practice again. It's a daily choice, sometimes an hourly choice, to release control and believe that God is good, present, and faithful. There will be days when trust feels easy and days when it feels impossible. There will be seasons when you see God's provision clearly and seasons when you have to trust without seeing. But here's what I've learned. God is always faithful, always. Even when circumstances are hard, even when outcomes aren't what we wanted, even when we can't see what He's doing, He's there, He's working, and He's good," she continued. "My journey from anxiety to trust hasn't been linear. I've had setbacks and struggles. I still have days when worry tries to take over. But I'm not the same woman I was 2.5 years ago when God spoke to me in that empty church. I'm free in ways I never thought possible. And that freedom isn't because I'm special or because I have perfect faith. It's because I learned to get out of God's way and let Him work." Emma finished the chapter and closed her laptop. She walked to her window and looked out at the Houston skyline, lights twinkling in the darkness. She thought about that desperate night in the church, about the words God had spoken that changed everything. "Your worries keep me from acting. Trust in me." Those words had transformed her life. They'd freed her from the prison of anxiety. They'd launched a ministry that was now helping thousands of women worldwide. They'd led to a book that was changing lives. They'd restored her family, deepened her faith, given her purpose she never knew existed, all because she'd learned to trust. Emma pulled out her phone and sent a message to the trust group chat. 2.5 years ago, God spoke to me and told me my worries were keeping Him from acting. Tonight, I'm finishing my second book about what He's taught me since then. I just want you all to know you're part of this story. Every testimony, every transformation, every act of courage to choose trust over worry, it all matters. We're all learning together, and I'm so grateful to be on this journey with you. The responses came immediately. Women sharing their gratitude, their own testimonies, their commitment to keep choosing trust. Emma smiled. This was her life now. Not perfect, not without struggle, but filled with purpose, peace, and the constant presence of a faithful God. She got ready for bed, and as she lay in the darkness, she prayed one final prayer. "God, thank you for speaking to me that night. Thank you for not giving up on me when I was drowning in worry. Thank you for teaching me to trust. Thank you for proving your faithfulness over and over again. Thank you for using my struggle to help others. I don't know what the future holds, but I know you hold the future, and that's enough. I trust you, God, with everything, now and always." Peace settled over her like a blanket, not the absence of challenges, but the presence of God in the midst of everything. Emma closed her eyes and drifted off to sleep, knowing that tomorrow would bring new opportunities to practice trust, new chances to help others find freedom, new evidence of God's faithfulness. She'd learned the secret that transformed everything. When you stop letting worry keep God from acting, and when you choose trust instead, He moves in ways you never imagined possible. And that truth, that beautiful, liberating, life-changing truth, was something she'd spend the rest of her life sharing with anyone who needed to hear it. "Your worries keep me from acting. Trust in me." Words that changed everything, words that set her free, words that thousands of women around the world were now learning to live by. And God, true to His character, was proving Himself faithful with every single one of them. This was Emma's story. But it was also God's story of what happens when broken, anxious people learn to trust Him fully, when they get out of His way and create space for Him to work. It was a story of transformation, of freedom, of faithfulness, of trust. And it was a story that was still being written, one trust-filled moment at a time.